As Erin said, I'm Robin Stern. I'm the co-founder and associate director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And particularly excited about this webinar today because my wheelhouse is that of mental health. I'm a psychoanalyst by training as well and in practice in New York City. And during the time of 9/11, I was in New York and had the opportunity to work with many people through their recovery and survival of that tragedy. And there were many lessons of resilience that came from that time that I have seen they're emerging right now during this time. And even thinking about it and talking about it, I can feel myself just choked up really with the admiration of how we all survived and the resilience we had in making it through. I've also had the privilege of working with nurses for about 7 years in New Haven. And speaking of resilience, I don't know a more resilient group. So I'm thrilled to be here with you and welcome again. Nikki?
Hi, everyone. My name is Nikki Albertson, and I'm the Director of Content and Communications at the Center for Emotional Intelligence, where I've worked for almost 20 years, which is really crazy. I'll have my 20th anniversary coming up in June of 2022. I also have a master's in nutrition education. I'm a group fitness instructor. I have personal training and health coaching certification. So my world is all about emotional and physical health and how the two sort of combine. I've worked with Robin on some of her projects with nurses. So I have a window into some of the experiences that all of you have had too. I would love to hear who's in the room. If you could drop in the chat where you're coming from, just to say hello so we can know who all of you are.
How do you do that?
Is the chat enabled? Oh, there we go. Good. I just want to make sure it was working. There we go. So Trumbull, West Hartford, Danbury, Montville,
Florida. Wonderful. Trumbull again. Alexandria, Virginia.
They said you can drop in the chat.
And for those of you who are not familiar with Zoom, there should be a bar at the bottom of your screen where it says chat, and you can click on that, and then you should be able to type a message. All right, well, we have people from Connecticut, New Jersey, Florida, probably more than I'm, Missouri, Pennsylvania, so lots of different places. So welcome, everyone. And I am going to go through some of this, and then I'll hand it over to Robin. And just to know that this is the second in a series of 3 webinars, and we have the third one coming up in November. And if you have questions, Erin will be looking at the chat and responding to any questions or thoughts or comments that you have, and we'll be using the chat a lot throughout today. All right, so I could just ask you to mute if you're, okay, great. All right, so we thought we would share a couple. There are a lot of memes about self-care out there, and that is one of the buzzwords in our presentation today. So we thought we would share a couple throughout the presentation. You can just take a look here. So canceling plans is okay. Staying home to cook is okay. Disappearing for a bit to get your life together is okay. Resurfacing in a foreign country with a new name 10 years later, it's okay. It's called self-care. And I know some people have said they've heard the word self-care so many times that they're just done hearing it. And so with all of that in mind, we wanted to tell you our definition and perspective on self-care. And I read this quote from a mom blogger probably a year or 2 ago now, and I loved it. I think it really reflects the essence of self-care that makes self-care important. Because self-care can feel like something selfish that is all about me, but really it's about giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. And I thought that was an important one for me personally. And we want to know from all of you what it means for you as a nurse. So what self-care means for you as a nurse, or what this quote means to you in your role as a nurse. And you can just pop it into the chat.
Caring for self before caring for others, leaving work at a decent time, taking care of yourself.
I want to highlight this one. It's a hard one. We're trained to give and give until there's nothing left. And I've heard that from a lot of nurses. So that's maybe why you're here today, to find self-care and how it can fit into your life. Being able to prioritize yourself without guilt. For some, it might be not working on the weekends. Forgiving ourselves for things that aren't finished. Yep, not able to give the best care if not caring for yourself. Advocating for oneself. These are all really great points.
Taking our own advice, really important one.
Work-life balance. Great. So I guess just to sum up some of your comments, it's not always easy, but it really isn't just a selfish thing. And it really helps us to be better for the world around us. So I think this aligns with one or more of the comments about, when you're in a role where you are asked to give so much of yourself, sometimes there's not a lot left to take care of yourself. But it isn't selfish. And it's one way to stay strong for those around us, the people we're caring for in our roles as nurses, but also our families and our loved ones. And self-care is also a pathway to resilience. And resilience is important for us and all of those around us as well. So what is resilience? Resilience is really the capacity to recover from and adapt to challenging situations. This past year and a half has had a lot of challenging, unexpected, uncertain situations that have evoked a lot of different emotions. And when we're resilient, we're able to recover from and adapt to those sort of ever-changing circumstances, particularly the difficult ones. And the good news is resilience isn't something you're born with, something you have or don't have. It's something that we can grow over time. And there are a lot of different pathways to resilience. I'm going to focus mostly on what we can do physically. One of the things we do at the Center for Emotional Intelligence, where Robin and I work, is we sort of think about strategies for managing our emotions in two different buckets. We think of things we can think about, or thought strategies, and things we can do, or action strategies. And I'm going to focus on the action strategies, what we can do. And a lot of these have to do with our body. I mentioned I have a background in health, nutrition, and fitness. And so I'll be speaking from some of that angle. So one of the things that's great that we all can do, because it's available to us all the time, is breathe. And we're already breathing all the time. So this is really about intentional breathing, being aware of our breath, breathing deeply, breathing slowly. And the reason this is really important to be intentional about how we breathe is that when we take more oxygen in, it actually changes the chemistry of our brains. So there are biochemical things that happen in our brains when we're feeling stressed, when we're feeling difficult emotions, when we're feeling overwhelmed, when we're feeling excited. And when we take that slow, deep breath, we shut down all of those impacts of those strong emotions, and we can think more clearly. So when we take those slow, deep breaths, we relax our body, we relax our mind, we shut down all of those negative things that are happening from the difficult emotions, from the strong emotions. And importantly, we activate the part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, that helps us not only to feel calmer, but actually to come up with solutions and to better handle situations. So all of these things make breathing and being intentional about our breathing really important. And I was in a meeting just a couple of hours ago about my 7th meeting of the day. And someone said, let's all take a breath together. And we took 3 breaths together. And it was probably the most relaxing and clear-headed I've felt all day. So I thought we could just take a couple of breaths together now. And so one way I like to think about taking slow, intentional breaths is breathing in for 3 or 4 counts, holding it for a couple of counts, and then releasing the breath. So we'll do that together. So we're going to inhale for 3, 2, 1, hold it, and release. I didn't really get to breathe because I said it. So I'm going to do it silently this time. So we breathe in and we release it out. And just one more. We breathe in and we release it out. And that's, as I said, a small thing that we all can fit into our day. You know, self-care, we picture things like going to the spa or getting a pedicure or taking a bubble bath and drinking a glass of wine. We don't always have time for all of those things, but we do have time to breathe and to really think about how we're breathing.
Thank you for that, Nikki. It was wonderful.
Yeah. So the other opportunity we have for self-care that's just a natural part of life is sleeping. Sleeping is an opportunity. Again, it's not always easy to sleep well, to sleep long enough to get that good sleep that we need. And I'm sure as nurses, you all know, this is me just telling you what you know already, but good sleep contributes to just better functioning overall. When we sleep better, we think more clearly, we make better decisions, we're in a better mood, and we're in a better place to manage the whole array of emotions that we have going on, especially in trying times and especially in roles such as taking care of other people, as you all do as nurses. When we get enough sleep, we have more energy and it impacts our immune system. So it makes for our body to better fight off infection, which is really important during a pandemic. Most of us, based on research, and this is going to sound like a lot, some jaws dropped the last time I said this to people, but we need between 7 and 9 hours for optimal physical and mental health. Can you get away with less? Yes. Can you get used to a little less? Yes. But some of these areas, like your thinking, decision-making, mood, et cetera, may be impacted. And some of the things that are recommended in the research are having a pre-bedtime ritual, going to bed early, particularly if you have children or pets or someone who snores next to you and you know that you're going to be waking up a lot. I have a white noisemaker next to my bed. I have blackout curtains. I'm not a good sleeper. I do a blue light blocker on my phone because there's blue light that can affect us before bed. I don't drink caffeine after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. There's so many things you can do to contribute to better sleep because it's not easy to get for many of us. So kind of having a plan about how you can get more sleep is just an important part of self-care. And the next one I'll talk about is just eating. And I know I have a lot of close friends who are nurses and they say they don't have time to eat or they just have a cookie and a Diet Coke, or I hear all kinds of stories. And I, myself, I'm in back-to-back Zoom meetings. Honestly, right before this meeting, I was like, my stomach's rumbling so loud. Did you guys hear that? And they're like, go grab a snack. It's hard to fit in and it's hard to prioritize this one. But I think with a background in nutrition and as a health coach, I'm constantly reminding people and myself that food is fuel, and it's fuel for our bodies, but it's also fuel for our minds. And we need a variety of food. We need a constant supply of food for our mood, for, again, being able to manage all of the emotions that we encounter throughout the day. And then there's this two-way relationship between food and our mood, that when we're in certain moods, choose different types of foods. So it's important to recognize the relationship between food and mood, the two-way relationship, so that we can make better choices. And again, I'm sort of preaching to the choir here, but eating whole foods, a blend of macronutrients, so getting enough protein, healthy fats and carbohydrates is important. And I think coming from sort of an emotional angle, it's important to enjoy certain comfort foods and know which ones, I have to have my ice cream every once in a while. I really enjoy red wine, and I'm willing to give up potato chips and French fries if I can get my ice cream or my wine every once in a while. So thinking about the comfort foods that you want to have in your life that bring you joy, even if they're not the healthiest thing in the world. Just moderating our intake of those unhealthy foods. And then really, again, just from a sort of mental health perspective, giving yourself grace. Many of us got way off track when we were quarantined this past year. It's easy to get off track when we're really busy, when we're taking care of people, and just accept your mistakes, and tomorrow's a new day and you can get back on track. My biggest tip for eating well is just having healthy food ready and accessible. I have all sorts of portable things, bars and snacks that are non-perishable that I keep in my desk at work, that I keep here at home. And then just having, fresh fruits and vegetables chopped and ready to go. So just having those things easy to grab in an easy to grab place, and maybe not having the Halloween candy or the other things that are yummy and easy to reach for as close by. And the last piece I'll touch on here is just physical activity and just keeping our bodies moving. I mentioned I'm a group fitness instructor. I've been teaching fitness classes since 2007. And it's just, for me, it's a way to maintain my sanity is to move and sweat, but different things work for different people. And so we know from the research that moving our bodies strengthens our bodies, keeps them younger, more youthful, gives us energy, prevents disease, again, strengthens our immune system, important during a pandemic. And in fact, it helps us to sleep better. So when we move our bodies throughout the day, we tend to sleep better at night. If we're parents, it sets a good example for our children, or for grandparents, sets a good example for them, contributes to our life expectancy, and in general, our quality of life. A bonus is it tempers the effects of poor nutrition. So if you do have that favorite treat like a donut or ice cream or whatever, when you're moving your body, your metabolism is more effective and your body's going to process the unhealthy things a little bit better. But the key thing here, I would say, is just find a way of moving that works for you. When we were quarantined, I didn't have any of the classes that I used to teach at the gym. So I began, for the first time in my life, walking regularly. And I actually developed a much closer relationship with my 11-year-old and my 18-year-old sons because we were walking more often. And I have a favorite routine now of downloading my favorite podcasts and listening to them on double speed while I'm walking, even if I can get 10 minutes in. So just finding some way, whether it's dancing or cleaning or walking or going to the gym, whatever your way is, but finding a way to move that works for you. And I'll close here and hand it over to Robin after this slide. So basically, I loved this one. I'll let you read it here. So when I'm feeling overwhelmed by all the things I have to do, I close my eyes, I take a deep breath and do none of those things. Then I freak out later when I have to do all of them at once. So I think this speaks to having a plan. And I mentioned a couple of strategies that I use personally for making sure I fit at least some of these things into my life. And some of these ways to have a plan are thinking about your barriers. So if you have children, you have pets, you have a job that is a certain number of hours or certain days of the week, where are the barriers and then where are the opportunities? And I think huge on the opportunities list are times of day when you have aren't taking care of anyone, when you aren't at work, but also just motivation level in general. So, I'm most motivated to take that walk in the morning. I'm much less motivated to go in the evening, for instance. And asking yourself what's most important. Research shows that we don't want to change everything all at once. So picking one that you want to start with, maybe your eating habits, or you've been drinking more this past year, or you've been getting worse sleep, pick one to start with and just set those small goals and celebrate the small goals. And again, give yourself grace, because it's not easy to change habits, especially when we're working under a lot of constraints in our jobs and in our lives. So I did a lot of talking, and I want to hear from all of you before Robin takes over from here. So you can use the chat again, and we just wonder, what have you done in the past year? I mentioned some of my strategies, or what could you do to better breathe, eat, sleep, or move? And I'll just say, I think the beauty of a webinar like this, I mentioned many of this is just reminding you of what you know, is just creating space to think through, what can I do to take care of myself better? The space alone sometimes helps us to plan and actually live out some of our strategies. So let's take a look here. Walking. Oh, that's great. You live on a beach. The fresh air definitely is helpful too. Walking with a dog, listening to books on tape, cooking more. That's one thing we did so much more of. I'm not a great cook, but I'm a better cook because of the pandemic. Taking a break, walking, bike. Yeah, and I have actually a little mini elliptical machine. You can get them on Amazon for around $100. And I will sit here on my computer, and it's just a walking elliptical machine. So there are things that we can do when we're stuck in front of a screen too. Prepare healthy foods on the weekend. Oh, that's amazing, Michelle. I've actually known a few people who are healthier now than they were before the pandemic, because they found some new time, space, interests along the way.
I love silver sneakers. That's great.
We have that at the gym where I work. It's a good one.
Right.
Don't feel guilty about saying no. Walks on the beach.
Yeah.
All right, we got a lot here. So feel free to read them. Robin and I didn't read all of them. So if you need some inspiration, check out the chat. I'm going to hand it over to you, Robin.
Thank you, Nikki. Even though many of those things are familiar, it's really wonderful to go deeply into them and to hear them over again and remind ourselves. So the next few slides are the themes that I collected after 9/11 that are relevant today. And I hope you think so too. We'll have a couple of opportunities to pause during speaking about the resilient mind for you to reflect and chat with us about what you're doing and how it's working for you. So the first theme that I noticed in people who were working towards moving forward after a tragedy or after a really difficult time was being able to let go. And one of my favorite quotes is from Elizabeth Lesser, who says, taking responsibility and giving up control are two sides of the healing coin. So we take responsibility for what we can do, and we let go of some of the expectations we have and some of the ways that we used to be in control. We give up the idea that we know when the pandemic will be over, and we give up the expectation that the pandemic will be over soon, or even the expectation that you know yourself and the way you're going to respond in every instance. We've all had the opportunity to face much more difficult situations and emotions than we thought was possible to move through. So be open to embracing your new self. Next slide, thank you. And finding strength, the resilient mind tells us that we can find strength. Strength through trauma is called post-traumatic strength by a lot of medical professionals. Analysts say that any trauma can be part of you going forward, and you learn something about yourself. I learned, for instance, that it was easier for me or more tolerable for me, or I could be creative about finding ways to see my children even when I couldn't see them in person. I did not think I could take it. I have 2 adult children and I see them pretty often. And I thought, this is really going to wipe me out. And it didn't, because I was creative about going and seeing my daughter in Brooklyn, for instance, outside of her apartment. We stood about 10 feet away from each other during the early parts of the pandemic, and we at least said hello. It was very painful to not see my children, as I'm sure many of you know, but we became creative. So I learned that about myself, and also using your social support and telling yourself a more positive narrative contributes to that post-traumatic growth. The moments of joy that you experience that you didn't expect to experience, this was also a joyful time, is a positive story about the pandemic. The resilient mind, love is healing. We all need that critical mass of love. When trauma leaves you broken open, you're open to the healing power of love. And love is generative. It brings us together in community, and love is forgiving. It leads to patience with and acceptance of self and loved ones in this time of extreme stress. So how have you been supported by your connections in this past year? How have you been supported by your connections in this past year, or year and a half, year plus? Tell us in the chat. How has the power of love supported you? I can tell you that I've heard from many nurses I work with that the power of love and community in their team at the hospital has supported them, that their family has supported them. What about for you? What connections have supported you over the last year? Nikki, what about you?
I was actually typing into the chat as everybody else was entering theirs. Yeah, for me, as much as I don't love sitting in front of my Zoom screen for long periods of time, it's been nice. It's a different type of connection, and it's in ways more intimate than seeing people every day. Not that I don't like seeing people more in person, but it's been a different type of connection.
I would say that about myself as well. I just Zoomed everyone like crazy initially. And we have a lot in the chat room. Staying in touch with close friends, worked on the COVID floors, families to take turns checking in. Staying in touch with close friends and making new friends. Just keep going for my kids. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. FaceTime, family FaceTimes. Yes, they became very popular in my house as well. Being with family. And didn't we all have to pause? So the power of pause, the resilient mind tells us that there is power in the pause. Pause led us all to focus. And many of us had a chance to prioritize and have the things that are really important in our life be those priorities, like health and food and shelter and love. During that pause, we realized that our emotional needs also require attention. During that pause, many of us took the time to reevaluate how we're living and to ask ourselves how we want to live going forward. Think about it. Did that happen for you during the time of pause? And after we paused, how do we make meaning? How do we make meaning out of the time that we had where we were out of control and completely beyond ourselves with anxiety? And now many of us burnt out and just kind of done with it, as Nikki said. How have we made our lives more meaningful based on new wisdom? And how do we ask ourselves the questions that we could have asked ourselves before the crisis. Am I doing the work that I want to do? Am I spending time with the people I want to spend time with? Am I living the life I want to live? Many people asked and answered those questions. Many people left jobs. Many nurses left jobs. Educators left jobs. People left their homes and cities and went to the country. And people are still figuring it out for themselves. And importantly, and I mentioned this a few minutes ago, the way you tell the story, the way you make meaning of the story about what happened in the last year plus is a reflection of your resilience and healing. There's a correlation, a positive correlation between telling a positive story and your ability to be resilient, to create more pathways, a deeper pathway to resilience. A positive story may simply be, I need to spend more time with my kids, and I did that. I began to do that even on Zoom. The resilient mind has let us know that what we used to think were extraordinary happenings, like school shootings, we've seen way too many of them, crisis, tornadoes even, tsunami, 9/11, terrorism, racial violence has become ordinary. The extraordinary has become ordinary. And the ordinary, the ability to give someone a hug, the ability to have dinner and sit face to face and not worry has become extraordinary over this time. And I think it's an important thing to think about, because I know for myself that I can't wait to hug my kids now when I see them. And I never want that to feel ordinary again. I never want to take for granted the things that I give gratitude for now every single day, that I can actually walk out of my house and not fear for my life, even though I still am nervous and I still am careful and I still wear my mask. The ordinary is extraordinary. So what is something for you that was ordinary pre-pandemic that became extraordinary? Something you really appreciate now that was just an ordinary part of your life before the pandemic. Tell us in the chat. Being able to travel and see family. Time with my wife and kids. Travel, sure. Going to eat out at restaurants. Hugging my mom. Yeah. Kids' sports. Anything else that was ordinary that became extraordinary? Spending time with kids. Ditto for that. Nikki, what about you?
I put in the chat, and I think I'm probably alone in this, but I love karaoke. So I have to say, out of all of the things that my husband and I like to do together, we haven't been able to go to karaoke for a really long time. So can't wait to get back to that.
Thank you. I think we can move on. Thank you. Importantly, when we're healing, whether it's from an acute event, acute traumatic event, or otherwise, or a long-term, we don't know when the end is going to happen, is there really an end in sight? Healing is a unique journey, like grief. Grief is also a unique journey. There is no timeline. There's no right or wrong way to grieve or to heal. And it's not about bouncing back, because you never go back to the same self before. You are transformed by what happened and the meaning you make of it. So it's about moving forward. And as I said a few minutes ago, making meaning out of what's happened. When I spoke to nurses along the way of the pandemic, and Nikki and I have written about this as well, people told us that they found strength and they stepped into leadership in a way they never thought they could. And that's not going to go, they're not going to go back to where they were. They're going to move forward in their unique journey, having gathered their strengths and healing through their strengths. So how have you, or can you, put any of these themes, any ways that you can be resilient in your mind, into practice? Letting go of expectations, finding strength that you didn't know you had, loving more in order to heal, taking the pause and reevaluating, making meaning out of your life in a different way, bringing some of what you learned forward, and accepting a new normal where things are that used to be ordinary is extraordinary, are extraordinary. How can you put any of these into practice or do more of them? For myself, I know that I will spend more time making meaning out of what's happened and the lessons that I've learned, and the lessons our family has learned about balance, for instance. I didn't realize that I needed more balance in my life. I just thought I was doing it all and doing it well. And I realize I need more balance. And Nikki, you'll be happy to hear this. I also realize I need more sleep. Definitely realize I need more sleep.
I would say too, and I kind of alluded to this earlier in the presentation, but just the power of creating space to reflect, and it relates to this taking pause. We all know what's good for us. We all know what we should be doing. We should be eating. We should be sleeping a certain amount, and we should be practicing gratitude and all of these things. But sometimes if we don't make the space to remind ourselves of what we know and to really reflect on what we need and how we're going to insert all of those things into our days, then it never happens. So for me, that's been a huge takeaway of the last year and a half, is just creating space. And that's self-care in itself.
Yeah. And loving more. Wow. I mean, we can all be loving more. Let's see, what do we have in the chat? Stop worrying about what I can change, like being late for things. More boundaries. Learning that your well-being is important. Back to what Nikki said at the beginning. For you to take care of your family, you have to be well. And it's also just important for you to take care of yourself. Forcing myself to take time away from my phone. Yeah. Hearing I love you. Okay. Let's talk about emotional intelligence. So we at the Center for Emotional Intelligence work to bring the power of emotions to all of you, and using the power of emotions to help us live those more compassionate lives that we want to be living in the service of the goals that we want. And how can we be more resilient through emotional intelligence? What does one have to do with the other? We can use the skills of emotional intelligence to recognize and regulate what emotions we're having. To recognize the emotions and regulate them, we call it name it to tame it. And when you can name it to tame it, you can move forward in a more helpful way, in a more effective way. Expressing your thoughts and feelings and being there for others will strengthen those bonds that we talked about, those loving bonds, and promote closeness. And social support, social connections is the #1 factor in building resilient pathways. So being skillful about knowing what you're feeling and managing it, As Nikki said earlier, it was a big challenge for all of us during the pandemic to be able to not only know what we feel, but to regulate it, and to manage our emotions, and to be open to the range of emotions that you're experiencing. Really important. So I'd like to share with you some of the emotions that we heard nurses were feeling in their own words. And I'll just read the quotes, read along with me. Okay, this is it. This is what I'm dealing with, acceptance. The only thing I can do is to focus on my reactions and say, yes, I'm feeling this, and this is why. I still have to make it through the day and help my team do the same. So letting go of the expectation that's going to be any different and taking responsibility for what you can do. Second one, I think the experience makes us more compassionate dealing with all people, no matter their life situation or what choices they've made. When all you're doing is fighting against death, you don't care if the person is vaccinated. You just want to help. Keep doing what you've been doing. And one of the things that I heard over and over during the pandemic is that the power of love, people's feeling of loving the people they work with and loving the work they do, help keep them going when things were really grim, when they faced death after death after death. And making meaning out of this experience for many nurses meant knowing that this was a calling and knowing that they were there to serve others and just keep going. And what a bonding experience it was for most teams to face this together. And finally, we've heard this from so many people, we had hope. As the pandemic went on, we started to realize that we needed to do our part. It was our call to duty, to pull together and help our peers in our community. That was motivating. And we heard over and over again when we listened to the nurses that they put aside whatever disagreements were driving them crazy the day before the pandemic started. And suddenly those didn't matter at all because they were fighting together. They needed to feel unified, to feel the support of each other. They needed to be able to reach out to each other in order to keep going. And I'm sure that many of you felt the same way in community. So what do we want to leave you with? A few thoughts. One of them is give yourself the permission to feel. Of course, that's also the name of Mark Brackett's wonderful book, all about our work. But give yourself the permission to feel. There are no bad feelings. There are unpleasant feelings. There are difficult feelings and difficult moments, but no bad feelings and no good feelings. All feelings are information. There are pleasant feelings and unpleasant feelings. And at the end of the day, it's important that you allow yourself to feel all of your feelings. It will give you clarity and freedom to think and to act on your feelings when you know what you're feeling. And it's also important to recognize that it's okay not to be okay. That there are times where no matter how much we care for ourselves, no matter how many hours we sleep, no matter how many pieces of celery we eat in a given day, no matter how much we move and how resilient our mind is, we still need a month off and we don't have it. We still need that extra hug and we can't get it. And we still need more money than we currently have and it's not available because we don't work in that place where we can get raises all the time. And many other things that we wish we could have that we're really not in control of. And even though all feelings are okay, and we want you to have your unpleasant ones, your pleasant ones, we know that positive emotions are good for you. They give you a lift and they help with well-being. They're physically regenerating and restorative. So use self-talk to nurture a positive view of yourself and others. Brene Brown in Dare to Lead said, "I know my life is better when I work from the assumption that everyone is doing the best they can, giving grace, as you've heard before in this presentation. Remind yourself of what you're grateful for and show appreciation again and again. One thing we hear consistently from the people we work with is nobody gives a damn. We don't get enough appreciation. We don't have any appreciation. And sometimes it feels worse right now to not have that appreciation, because there was a time during the pandemic where nurses and educators and people on the front line were so appreciated. And now back to normal. And maybe you're only as good as your last performance. So consider if your current strategies for managing your emotions, taking care of yourself, taking care of your body, and nurturing your resilience through your body and through your mind are working for you. And if they're not working for you, ask yourself what you need and how you can get it. And reach out and ask others as you need to. So just close your eyes, if you will, 30 seconds, and consider if your current strategies for managing your emotions are working for you. And then finally, think about what would be different in your life if you took more time to care for yourself. If you took more time to eat healthfully, to sleep, to move, to breathe, to let go of expectations, to make meaning of difficult situations, to pause, and to appreciate the ordinary as extraordinary. What would be different in your life? Tell us in the chat. We want to hear from you. Would feel less stressed and enjoy the little things. I would be doing my hobbies, a feeling of calmness. My health would be improved. I'd feel less guilty, less stressed. Stress and frustration, I would take more time to celebrate my wins. Important to celebrate those wins. More peace, more patience. What about for you, Nikki? What will be different?
I think I agree. It would just be in a better place. I'm seeing this. People said less stress. I don't know if less stress, because there's a lot of stress that's just there and I can't really control how much stress is there, but I just would be in a better place to manage it. So I better manage my stress.
I definitely would be more balanced, more work home, body mind balance. Thank you, Erin. You would ask for more help to achieve more balance. There you go. So I think we're near to close. Are there questions that you have for us just in the last few minutes? Please. You will all be receiving a copy of the PowerPoint of these slides, and feel free to reach out to the center with any questions that you may have.
And you can continue if you have questions. I imagine some people may be typing questions or thoughts to add into the chat. And Erin, if you could pop on and let us know about the next webinar that's coming up.
Absolutely. So our next webinar, the third webinar in our series, will be Wednesday, November 17th. Just from registering for this webinar, you are automatically registered for the next one. So what does that mean? We'd love for you to come, but it doesn't mean you have to come. It means that if you're not able to make it, we'll send you the recording of that one as well. As a follow-up to this email, I'm going to send you a link to our collection of webinars. So you'll be able to see the first webinar in this series if you weren't able to catch it, this webinar, and ultimately I'll be adding the one on the 17th as well. And most importantly, one of the questions that I frequently get is, can I share this information with other nursing colleagues or nurses that are in hospital settings or private settings, etc.? Please share this with anyone and anyone who would benefit from hearing what we have to say about managing emotions and how we can get to a place of better well-being. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is on the registration, and the follow-up email will also be coming from my email as well.
And I want to thank you for your thoughtful participation and for being willing to share your feelings, your thoughts, and your ideas with the rest of the group, and for your time. Nikki, anything last minute?
No, I think that's it. So I hope that all of you can find at least one thing to do differently in your lives that we offered to you today.
And thank you, John. We see you in the Zoom room. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon, and thank you for generating awareness about this series. We appreciate it. Take care.
Bye.